We're going to turn now to our second panelist, Mr. Anders Kompass, who is the Senior Director of the Field Operations and Technical Cooperation Division at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who has had extensive experience in the field himself. Over to you.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you, and thank you also for the invitation. Very interesting seminar. We're all learning, and let me say from the beginning, I think we have still more questions than answers on these issues. My perspective is rightly, as you said, more from the field. I spent 10 years working as head of 3 country offices of the Office of the High Commissioner in Colombia, Mexico, and last 3.5 years in Guatemala, and also before that in UNDP in the early 90s. And I liked very much what my former boss Bertie said about being in friend. Thank you. Being part of that. Our office is part of a human rights movement. So I'm going to try to talk within that spirit of being part of the big human rights movement. And to say something very obvious from a field perspective, including the perspective I have now when I'm in Geneva and supporting our field work, technical cooperation work in the 50+ different kind of presences that the Office of the High Commissioner is supporting. And it's, as I said, something very obvious that I found out the first day I was sent to Colombia by Bertie in 1999, that there is a big gap between what we hear in Geneva and what is the fact on the ground. And all the kinds of gaps that we are talking about, knowledge gap, implementation gap, capacity gap, and political gap. And I think that it's still very much true, in spite of some progress that we have seen, particularly where we have been present. And it was interesting to see the list here of the countries which have received most numbers of visits of special rapporteurs, and to see where we are present as the Office of the High Commissioner. In many of the top countries is precisely where we have country presences. So one of the top countries, for example, Guatemala, at the same time is the country where we have, according to Philip Alston, 98% of impunity. So it's an incredible gap that we are still facing, in spite of even some of the countries that have received a lot of support and engagement from the system, so to say. So that is what I think is still the biggest challenges, or biggest challenge that we are facing, is how to overcome this gap. And of course, here in Geneva, I would very much like to see that some of the recommendations that has also been put in this report, for example, how the UPR or the review of the Council regarding the special the recommendations from both the special procedure treaty bodies and UPR could be taken into account when countries are being running for election or re-elections to the Council, how the UN system can also do more to link their own activities in the field to the recommendations. And I think that second part is what is more, let's say, into what we are now trying to do in the field, and what we've actually been trying to do from the beginning, much before we had the UPR system on board. Our platform, so to say, as when we are engaged on the ground, is that we are representing, we're talking from the special procedures and the treaty bodies. That is what gives us the legitimacy to try to engage with each country and the different counterparts in the interlocutors at country level. And that, when I'm talking about the gaps, that has also been very much the reality when it comes to the rest of our UN country team partners. A tremendous lack of knowledge what is the system. So it has been almost like a pioneer work during the last 10-15 years for the Office of the High Commissioner, with its very few resources and in being present only where we have an invitation and a possibility to be present, and then to establish a relationship with the different interlocutors. When I should say, as being part of the movement, the human rights movement, of course, our principal interlocutors that are sometimes the reason why we enter a country and why we are able to stay in a country is thanks to the human rights movements. Those are the people that are our principal partners. But I should also say, and not to sound completely pessimistic, that yes, there have been improvements, and we can see it concretely where we have been present in terms of creating awareness. And I should also say some kind of empowerment to our colleagues in the UN country team. I had myself the experiences when we have had to go through the difficult moments, for example, when we have to present publicly our annual reports to the former Commission, which was much more critical than they are today to the Council, because then there were standalone country reports. Now we are part of the annual report of the High Commissioner to the Council. And there were always, in some of these countries, always a lot of discussions and sometimes opposition from parts of the governance against what we said in these reports. And our colleagues in the UN country team, they really took refuge and left us alone, saying, and wait to see what happened with these persons. Are they going to be kicked out of the country? Or are they going to have to change the way that they are engaging, change the content of the report, change the content of the recommendations? And when they found out that we were able to stay the track with full support from our leadership here in Geneva, from the High Commissioner, from the Deputy High Commissioner, on what we were saying based on our monitoring mandate, our reporting mandate, and the 3 A's that a previous speaker talked about, being our capacity to be analytical and our capacity to have access to all different parts of the offer society, that gives us an enormous strength. And I think that is an added value that we have compared to some of the other parts of the system. As I used to say, when we are in a country, we are there 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, 30 days per month, 365 days per year, and so on and so on. That gives us a tremendous credibility to engage with the different parts of that. We are not inventing the reality. We are there, if we are doing our job in a professional way, we have the capacity to know what is happening and to have a good analysis of what is happening in the country. And based on that, I think, and I can now see that there is a growing interest in the UN system towards working on human rights, that they have seen us as being the smallest part of the UN system with the smallest amount of resources, being very much exposed, but in many cases we have been able to have a positive impact, thanks also to change of political will in the countries that we are working in. I can see my friend here from Colombia, and I think Colombia is a very interesting example that have shown that from having had very difficult relationship, we are now in a phase where we have a very constructive, good relationship, but where we can speak about issues that are very critical for the future of Colombian society, but we can do it in a very constructive way. That was difficult some 10 years ago, when but we had to learn, both of us, how to engage on very critical and difficult issues. So I can see that there's now a growing demand within the UN system on working closer with the Office of the High Commissioner and to learn more about the different mechanisms that the UN human rights system is offering. And of course, the UPR system is a more attractive entry point, and I would make the emphasis on the entry point for our partners in the UN country team, because we're talking about recommendations that have been accepted by the governments themselves. So it gives us an opportunity to engage the UN country team around the recommendations and try to engage the different stakeholders in the country that hopefully participated in the preparation and were very much aware of what happened here in Geneva during the meeting, and then can follow up very actively in trying to help and facilitate and encourage the government to put together some kind of an action plan with the support of the UN country team, but also from the donor community, civil society organizations. Because that depends still very much on the type of space that exists in every country. Our role, of course, is to not to forget the recommendations that have not necessarily been taken up in the UPR system. And I think my colleague Pablo's observation about some of the most critical part, apparently, from the treaty body recommendations, like the issues around impunity, should absolutely not be forgiven. And that is part, as a core also of our own concern as an office in many of the countries that we are working on. So those are the issues that we, as an office, could continue working on, and then having some kind of a distribution of work between ourselves and the colleagues in the UN system and the international community. A final point is that still the lessons learned is that human rights is a very sensitive, political and difficult issue to work with. And I'm talking about something very, very concrete that it's happening on a regular basis still in 2010, that not only our own colleagues on the ground, but also colleagues from the UN country teams, and I should say also from the international community, diplomats, are running into difficulties. Government representatives are telling them very clearly to step back and not to get involved, not raise their voice. And there, I think there is still a tremendous need for a better cohesion, support and solidarity among our leadership, both within the UN system but also from the international community. And it's a difficult thing. All of us who wants to be popular, want to have good relationship with our national counterparts, especially when we are talking about governments. But when especially our colleagues in the UN system feel that they don't have the sufficient support from the top leadership in the United Nations, in New York or in Geneva, it's going to be extremely much more difficult to work on these issues. Thank you.